stop, then you restart, saying Israel. I sent the article, the interview to the editors, and they edited the interview with a substitution. They put a Jewish state instead of Israel, in their opinion, just to avoid redundancy. And you immediately called me to little bit upset to clarify and to rectify that that substitution was a huge mistake. And so my first question is why that substitution is a huge mistake, because we often see this kind of equivalence in the public debate.
Yes, thank you for this. In the midst of Israel's genocide against 2.3 million Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip, I did not expect the question to be about why we reject equating Israel with Jews. Calling Israel the Jewish state just entrenches its propaganda, which is at its core anti-Semitic, in fact, as progressive anti-Zionist Jews have been saying. Equating Israel to Jews, calling it the Jewish state, and following the Zionist movement's propaganda that they represent all Jews, Israel speaks for all Jews, this makes all Jews like a monolithic group with no human diversity, and that's very anti-Semitic. The second aspect is equating Israel with all Jews makes Israel's crimes Jewish crimes. The occupation would be Jewish, ethnic cleansing and apartheid and genocide would be Jewish, but they're clearly not Jewish. Those crimes have absolutely nothing to do with Judaism or with Jews. Those are crimes committed by a political system, a political state, and its institutions. The fact that it claims to be the Jewish state does not mean we should accept that, because a lot of Jewish communities do not accept Israel speaking on their behalf.
That's important to understand how Jewish people. May I ask you another question similar? When we say Jewish people instead of Israelis, and what we mean specifically when we say Jewish people?
People of the Jewish faith, people who consider themselves Jewish. They could be Jewish French, Jewish Italians, Jewish South Africans, Jewish Arabs, like Muslim Arabs, like Muslim Italians, and so on. Some Jews may consider Judaism an ethnicity, not just a faith, and that's, of course, they identify, it's up to them. But equating Jews with Israel is what we object to as Palestinians, and also with us, anti-Zionist Jews. This equation cannot and should not be accepted.
So to break this equation is one of the goals of the ongoing protests in US and all the of the BDS movement. It's important, isn't it?
No, it's not part of the BDS movement. This is part of the struggle by Jewish anti-Zionist groups, and we support it. In the BDS movement, we're concerned about Palestinian rights. We have to think beyond the Jewish box, so to speak. Palestine is not a Jewish issue. It's a settler colonial apartheid issue. It has to do with Israel as a state, as a settler colony. It's not a Jewish problem. And I know Europeans are obsessed with this issue because of the history of Europe, but that's your problem, it's not ours. You cannot superimpose your problems on us. Italy destroyed the Jewish communities. Germany destroyed its Jewish communities. Jewish Europeans were destroyed systematically in the Holocaust. That's a European issue. And of course, it concerns all humans, but it's not a Palestinian issue per se. In the Palestinian BDS movement, we're anti-racist. We oppose all forms of racism, including anti-Jewish racism. And support for BDS among especially younger Jewish activists is tremendous, not to mention Jewish intellectuals and writers and scientists and so on and so forth.
Can you explain what is settler colonialism?
Settler colonialism is when groups come from, usually from Europe, that's where settler colonialism starts, colonize a certain piece of land, but unlike the traditional colonialism, British, Italian, Dutch, French, Spanish, Portuguese, German colonialism, it aims at displacing, replacing the indigenous population, or completely subjugating them to take over their land, mainly, their wealth, and so on. So in the Americas, what now we call the Americas, in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, in Algeria, and Palestine, those are settler colonial situations where the colonists were not just interested in exploiting the country and its wealth, but actually displacing and replacing the indigenous populations. So the Americas and Australia are possibly the most well-known examples of settler colonialism, but so was South Africa. Although South Africa was a very different case of settler colonialism than in the Americas.
Okay, I start to talk about BDS from the beginning. What is BDS and what's the philosophy that animates it?
The Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, or BDS movement, was launched in 2005 by the absolute majority in Palestine, in Palestinian civil society and in exile. So Palestinians are divided because of the different phases of Israeli settler colonialism or Zionist settler colonialism into three main constituent parts. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, including East Jerusalem, are 38% approximately of the Palestinian people. Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship and are treated as second or third class citizens are 12% of the Palestinian people, and a whole 50% are Palestinians in exile, not allowed to go home. But also among Palestinians who are citizens of Israel and Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, there's a very large minority of internally displaced persons, internal refugees, who are also not allowed to go back to their villages and lands from where they were expelled during the 1948 ethnic cleansing of Palestine, or the Nakba. So BDS focuses on the rights of all three constituent parts of the indigenous Palestinian people. It calls for ending the occupation, ending the system of apartheid and racial segregation, and for the right of return for refugees, return and reparations for refugees as stipulated in international law. BDS is very much inspired by the South African anti-apartheid movement and the US civil rights movement, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and so on. And it is rooted in a century of Palestinian popular resistance against first British colonialism and then Zionist settler colonialism. As I said earlier, BDS opposes all forms of racism, including anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, and anti-Jewish racism. We oppose all forms of discrimination and racism. As a non-violent movement, BDS calls for boycotts, divestment, and eventually pressure on states and interstate organizations to impose sanctions, very much as was done against South African apartheid. So to dismantle Israel's settler colonialism, apartheid, and military occupation, we need states, corporations, institutions to cut their links of complicity. When Italian universities continue business as usual with Israeli universities that are implicated in the crimes committed by the state, and we can get to that, Italian universities are harming our struggle. So when we ask them for solidarity, the first point we're asking them is to stop their complicity, to stop harming us. That's the prerequisite for solidarity. And sometimes many activists, many supporters of Palestinian rights do not understand this critical point. It's not about charitable act to raise a Palestinian flag and stand with the Palestinians. First and foremost, end complicity of your institutions, and if you have the power, of your state as well, because Italy is deeply complicit in Israel's crimes against us. From Leonardo to many other institutions and corporations, Italy is deeply complicit. And that triggers the ethical responsibility for every single person in Italy to try to offset, to end that complicity, and if you cannot end it, at least offset it partly by supporting BDS. Final point is that BDS is led by the absolute largest civil society coalition. It is not like an ivory tower kind of movement led by a few intellectuals or activists. It's led by a huge coalition. All trade unions, academic unions, farmers groups, women's groups, students, engineers, everyone is part of the BDS movement pretty much. So that, in a nutshell, is how we work. It's an intersectional movement. It connects Palestinian liberation with other struggles for justice, climate justice, gender, racial justice, economic justice.
Okay, and is BDS working?
Well, it definitely is, because despite the genocide, and it's very hard to celebrate 20 years of BDS. On the 9th of July, it will be the 20th anniversary of the BDS movement. But we look at indicators whether it's working or not, because we are quite scientific, actually, in engaging in assessing our impact. We're not very romantic about it. We need to see results on the ground. But our detractors, our enemies, are massive. We're not dealing just with Israel. We're dealing with the entire colonial West, as we've seen during this genocide. Israel's genocide could not continue for 21 months without massive military, diplomatic, political, academic, cultural, epistemic discourse complicity of the colonial West, led by the United States, UK, and Germany, but also Italy and France and Netherlands and others. F-35 jets that are destroying Palestinian lives have parts made in dozens of countries, including most of Europe. So the complicity is so deep, the financial institutions, the insurance institutions, the high-tech companies, and so on and so forth. So BDS is fighting against this massive network, colonial network, not just the Israeli settler colony, basically. Despite that, Israel since 2014, so 11 years ago, has considered BDS a strategic threat to its entire regime of oppression. Why would a nuclear power that has hundreds of nuclear bombs and extremely well funded by the US and Europe, why would it consider a human rights movement to be a strategic threat of the first order? It's because it works. As one Israeli general once said in facing popular resistance to Israel's walls and settlements, he said, "We don't do Gandhi very well." He meant we don't know how to deal with Palestinian popular resistance, nonviolent resistance. We use tanks and we use jets, but we don't know how to deal with this form of nonviolent resistance that's anti-racist, and that's inspiring and attracting support from especially young people around the world, including young Jewish people around the world, are really increasingly supporting BDS. So it's clearly working at the economic level, academic level, cultural level. Just look around in Europe today. 2 years ago, we had no university across Europe cutting ties with Israel, none, zero. We just had one university in South Africa 14 years ago, cut relations with Israel, and that's it. Today, in this 20 months of genocide, we've seen so many universities cut financial ties and or academic ties with Israel or with companies involved in Israel's crimes. In the cultural sphere, thousands of writers, publishers have joined the cultural boycott of Israel, which is institutional, like the academic boycott. Largest pension fund in the world, the Norwegian Pension Fund, has divested from Israel bonds, $500 million, and so on and so forth. I can give a lot of examples of the impact. So definitely it is working, and it is gaining a lot of traction across the globe.
Does it work more the cultural boycott or the economic boycott?
I would say the cultural boycott is growing at a faster rate. The economic boycott just began to be very effective in the last few years. We've always had economic successes as well. In 2015, we forced the French conglomerate Veolia to abandon entirely its illegal projects with Israel completely. Why? Because we made it lose over 20 billion with a B dollars worth of contracts around the world and tenders around the world, from Sweden to Ireland to the UK to the US to Kuwait to many other countries, Australia, to many other countries. So it's been working. But in the last 20 months of Israel's ongoing genocide, BDS has exposed the level of corporate complicity in Israel's crimes. And now we have UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese's report affirming how deeply complicit those corporations have been in enabling Israel's occupation, apartheid, and genocide. Not just the military companies, the obvious ones, but also the tech companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Palantir, and IBM, and so on. Also, energy companies like Chevron and British Petroleum and others, insurance companies like AXA, infrastructure companies like CAF, and even supermarkets like Carrefour, and on and on. So there's so many examples of this complicity that corporations are deeply implicated in Israel's atrocity crimes against Palestinians, and BDS is fighting all that, and we are achieving some results. McDonald's, for example, is shouting out loud because of lost revenue across the world, especially in the global south. Microsoft has begun to feel the hate of BDS. Other companies like Intel, one of the largest tech companies, had to abandon a $25 billion project in Israel, which it planned to invest in the beginning of the genocide. But BDS played our role, not the only role, but our role in pushing Intel to cancel that project.
Okay, thank you. In one of your speech, the title was "We are just academics." Then you said we are just academics. We don't engage in politics. They are just excuses. Are you sure about that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
You said, if I'm not wrong, that in one of your speech, we are just academics. This refrain is just an excuse to don't risk in politics.
No, okay, I understand now. No, I was playing on the meaning of just. It has two meanings: just as in only academics, or just as in supporting justice. So the title of my talk was Just Academics, and I was basically refuting the argument that some academics use, especially in science, in math. I'm an engineer myself, so I know the mentality, where they say, oh, we're scientists, we don't do politics, and we don't take sides on those conflict issues because we're scientists, we produce physics or technology or whatever. And my argument in that talk was that you can't seriously look at science as above politics, because that in itself is a political position. When your state, when your institution is implicated in wrongdoing, in harming others, in war crimes, in crimes against humanity, you can't be neutral. There is no neutrality. So Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa once said, if you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. So scientists who claim to be just scientists are complicit because their institutions are complicit. I mean, if you're a scientist in Tanzania, for example, maybe you're not complicit because universities in Tanzania are not complicit. But in Italy, in Germany, in the UK, of course, you're complicit. Your universities are terribly complicit. So you cannot take a position that I'm not involved and I just do science. There is no such a thing. When Germans claim to do that, you know the answer, what happened during World War II. German academics and scientists who said, oh, we're just, academics and scientists, we're producing science. If the regime is using it for something that is terrible for humanity, it's not our fault. We're just mathematicians or physicists or chemists or biologists or engineers, but it's not our fault how our science is being abused. Yes, it is your fault, especially when you're in a quasi-democratic country like Italy, not totally democratic, but more democratic than Saudi Arabia, let's say. Everything is relative. You have some leeway, you have some leverage, you can speak out and you can make sure that your institutions are not complicit. That is an ethical duty. It's not just being nice. It's an ethical duty to work to end complicity.
Okay, maybe you're asking too much. asking academics to support BDS and not other form of solidarity with Palestine.
Before supporting BDS, we're asking for something much more basic. Stop harming us. Is that too much to ask? Your universities are harming us. Your state is harming us. Your corporations are harming us. Can you stop harming us? This is a profound ethical obligation. It's the most fundamental. Before solidarity, before supporting BDS or supporting anything, stop harming us.
Okay, I saw you are you disagree with I would call them co-resistance movements that form the Palestinians and Israelis that work together against governments.
No,
I
not co-resistance, coexistence movements, not co-resistance. Co-resistance
I
is
make
something.
the example of standing together. I saw you made a very hard critics about that, and so
Yeah.
to other similar experience. Why is that?
In a situation of oppression, there are two basic conditions, ethical conditions, for people from the oppressor community to stand with you in your struggle to end oppression. First, they cannot be complicit, so that the joint project has to be aimed at, its objective has to be ending complicity, ending crimes done to the oppressed people, ending oppression, ending the systems of oppression. The second condition, which is basic ethical condition, is people from the oppressor side have to recognize your comprehensive rights under international law. If they don't recognize your comprehensive rights under international law, then they don't recognize you as a human, as an equal human. The oppressed become dehumanized and deserve a subset of human rights that all humans deserve. And we cannot accept that. This is not something that we've invented completely. In South Africa, blacks and whites could not work together in an ethical way without whites, those who belong to the oppressor community, first saying, we oppose apartheid and we will work with you, be it a scientific project, a cultural project, a theater, music production, against oppression, to end apartheid. So it's the same conditions, basically. You have to recognize the basic rights of all people, equal rights, and you have to work together to end oppression. So groups like Standing Together, they're very deceptive. They don't recognize the most basic Palestinian rights, like the right of Palestinian refugees to return. Why is this so important? Because 68% of the Palestinian people are refugees, external or internal refugees, 68%. So any group of Israelis that cannot recognize that basic rights is probably seeing us as not equal humans. We're subhumans to them. They use us, they tokenize us to appear as if they're doing something. Oh, we oppose the occupation of the West Bank, but not East Jerusalem. We oppose the occupation of Gaza, but not the genocide. We don't like violence, we don't like killing, but we shall not call it genocide. Well, a UN commission of inquiry has called it genocide. UN special rapporteurs, dozens of them, have called it genocide. Holocaust and genocide scholars, including many Israeli scholars of the Holocaust, have called it genocide. Why can't you admit it's genocide, you small Israeli group? So that's a choice they make. That's complicity. So they do not recognize some of our most fundamental rights, and they do not recognize the massive genocidal violence being committed against us as such. They call it violence, war, conflict, whatever you want, but not genocide. And therefore, they reach the wrong conclusions. They look at supporting Palestinian rights as a charitable act. You're part of the oppressor community. We don't need your charity. We need you to stop your oppression. And we have many Israeli partners who co-resist with us. That's why Standing Together is a deceptive coexistence group, coexistence under oppression. Co-resistance should not be used by a group like this because it's a term that we developed, and it means working together, resisting together, based on recognition of full rights and based on ending the systems of oppression. And we have many Jewish Israeli partners who do co-resistance with us.
Okay, talking about dehumanization, um, Yoav Gallant called you human animals, and I could go on for hundreds of declarations like that, and I could go also in the past. I remember when the former Minister of Justice, Sheked, made that Facebook post in which she called to genocide. So my question is, how far goes in the past the process of dehumanization of Palestinians?
It is from the very beginning. It's in the DNA of settler colonies. It's not unique. Every settler colony, the settler colonists dehumanized the natives, dehumanized the indigenous population. That's in the DNA of any settler colonial project. Because otherwise, how could the settler colonists live with themselves, destroying, killing, massacring, committing genocide against indigenous people? They have to rationalize it in their heads to say, well, they're not really humans. It's like killing scorpions or killing snakes because you want safety where you're living. So you kill the indigenous because they're a threat. So you reverse, there's an inversion of the truth. The indigenous become the threat, and the settlers, the colonists, become those entitled to destroy the threats, basically. So this dehumanization has always been there in the Zionist project. Anyone who goes back to the Zionist literature in the 1930s, 20s, the dehumanization is very, very clear. In fact, some Zionist leaders, from right-wing Zionist leader like Jabotinsky, an extremely influential Zionist leader, as far back as the 1920s, wrote this short but extremely powerful pamphlet called The Iron Wall, in which he criticized his fellow Zionists from the more lefty types who were so racist to think that indigenous Palestinians can be bribed or destroyed and convinced to leave Palestine so that we can establish a Jewish supremacist state. And he said, they're not idiots. Natives will keep resisting us. Stop that delusional and kind of racist mentality. They will resist us. That's the natural way indigenous people resist colonists. And therefore, we have to build an iron wall that they cannot breach. This iron wall is not just a concrete wall, but wall in their minds. We have to keep hitting them so they give up. It's a wall of hopelessness. And that was Jabotinsky's answer to how to deal with the natives. So it's always been there, the dehumanization, but it has never reached this blatant, explicit, in-your-face level that we're seeing today. So the Zionist movement always tried to hide its deep, deep racism, its genocidal racism. Look at the Nakba. I mean, they destroyed many, hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian villages. They threw Palestinians into the fire in several villages, and that's very well documented by historians, including Israeli historians like Ilan Pappé. So the destruction of people killing pregnant women and killing children, that's always been there, but never so blatantly and so openly without any shame. They're telling the world, we don't care. We're powerful. We have the US and Europe behind us, and we can do whatever we wish to this indigenous population.
Of course. Wait a minute. Why Israel is so powerful? I mean, they are killing children every day, and nobody seems capable to stop it. Why is that?
I think that's a very complex question, and I don't think we'll have enough time to analyze it, and I can't claim to have 100% answer, basically. There are several answers. If you look at Professor Jeffrey Sachs, the prominent Jewish American economist from Columbia University, or John Mearsheimer, a very mainstream political scientist in Chicago and so on, they are increasingly looking at the effect of the Israel lobby very seriously. The corrupting, intimidation, bullying, that are being used as tactics by the lobby to influence decisions by parliaments, by politicians, by elected officials, even by heads of states. So Jeff Sachs, for example, Professor Sachs, says many of those members of Congress are bought and paid for by the lobby. That's his term. That's one aspect. There's another aspect, the imperialism aspect. People like Chomsky have argued that for decades, that Israel serves an imperial interest for the West, for the US, for Britain initially, and then for the United States. And you look at the German chancellor recently who said, Israel is doing our dirty work for us. Coming from a German chancellor, that just was, and I know I have a lot of Jewish colleagues who were just shocked that he would say that. It reminded them of the days of the few Christian feudal lords in Europe who would send, quote unquote, their Jews to collect taxes from farmers. And that would lead to pogroms that they just sit around and watch. So Israel is being framed as the global Jew doing the dirty business for the imperial West. This is beyond anti-Semitic. This is really horrible to say, but the Chancellor of Germany said it. So there's that aspect as well. So I think it's all the above. It's not either or. There is corruption and intimidation and bribery and spyware being used. Most recently, the Spanish government was threatened, the Prime Minister of Spain, for the first time ever, that we have your record from spyware and we haven't revealed it yet. So watch your words when you talk about sanctions against Israel and military embargo against Israel. We have not exposed what we have on you. Now, Israel has always done that, but it has never said it so openly, that we're using spyware to spy on heads of European states, not the United Arab Emirates dictatorship or the Saudi dictatorship, or no, on the Spanish prime minister. So that's also a factor. So there are many factors that can explain this power. The last factor is the absolute corruption of the Arab leadership. So the absolute weakness of the Arab officialdom is also giving a relative power to the Israeli side, so to speak. And that includes the Palestinian officialdom, of course.
I'd like you to make some example of the of living under occupation, and because it seems that some academics don't even think there are colleagues in the occupied territory. How would be the daily life for an academic in Israel, for an Israeli academic, and how would be the daily life for a Palestinian academic?
I'm not sure if we can condense all that in a couple of minutes, because life as a settler colonist is extremely different than life as an indigenous academic. If you're an academic at An-Najah University in Nablus, or let's begin with the academics in Gaza, which for some reason, some academics in Europe like to forget. And we would like to remind them, you have thousands and thousands of colleagues in Gaza who were killed, who lost everything, whose universities were wantonly, deliberately demolished, one after another. The entire academic life in Gaza has been destroyed, deliberately, wantonly, without absolutely any excuse, military excuse that is, as international law experts have said, and many human rights organizations have said. In the occupied West Bank, if you're a professor at Birzeit University, a professor at An-Najah University, reaching your university, reaching your lab or your classroom or your students or your library is a struggle in itself if you live outside the city borders, because you have to cross military checkpoints. You may get arrested, you may get beaten, you may get hit, you may get injured for absolutely no reason, just because the young soldier at the checkpoint feels like it that day. It's that level of impunity. As Israeli academics, like most Israeli society, have shifted to the far, far, far right, including the fascist right. They like to hide that fact, but thousands and thousands of them have served in the army, in the military during this genocide, have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocidal acts during those last 21 months. Whether they're physicists or sociologists, ethicists or hydrologists, they've all committed crimes if they served in the military. And that has to be looked upon. So they don't only enjoy this colonial privilege, but they also participate directly, quite often, in the crimes committed by the state, and they overwhelmingly support the genocide. Overwhelmingly, the absolute majority of Israeli academics support the genocide. They've always supported it. Numbers go up and down, but even in November 2023, a month and a half into the genocide, when it was very clear where Israel was heading, thousands and thousands of Palestinians were killed and institutions were being demolished. 94% of Jewish Israelis supported the military acts in Gaza. 94%. That includes every sector of society, including academics. So they cannot claim that we're producing science. They're producing the pillars of the occupation and apartheid, from ethics to engineering, to weapon construction, to ideological argumentation, to epistemology. They're producing the very pillars of the system of oppression in Israeli academic institutions. The absolute majority are implicated in this work, as Maya Wind has very meticulously recorded and researched in her book.
Why the West we feel so familiar with Israel instead than with Palestinians?
Because the West is still very colonial. I mean, you like to think of yourselves as post-colonialism. There's nothing post about it. It's just a new form of colonial power. Look at France and Africa. It's not exactly post-colonial. It's extremely colonial. Look at the UK, and so on and so forth. Look at your companies colonizing so many lands in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. So the neo-colonialism continues. And Israel, as a settler colony, was born out of European settler colonialism. There's a family relationship there. So it's not like a foreigner. It's part of Europe. And when the German chancellor says they're doing the dirty work for us, but they're part of us, in a way, he's saying. When the UK leaders, whether conservative or Labour, makes no difference, or the French leaders, or the Dutch leaders, or Italian leaders, and so on, when they speak about Israel justifying its genocide, calling it, quote, self-defense, in complete dismissal of international law and the UN Charter and the ICJ, which as far back as 2004 said an occupying power cannot claim the right to self-defense as stated in the UN Charter against people under its occupation, under its control. Regardless, when they defend Israel, they use the same dehumanizing language against us. And this European colonialism comes back. It's, again, in the DNA of the system in Europe, in universities, in cultural centers, not just in governments and parliaments and political parties. You see it everywhere. In our struggles to get universities to divest or cut ties with complicit Israeli universities, you hit a wall with so many administrations that use the most racist colonial language nonchalantly, like really not even noticing how racist they're being. But they are, and I can give so many examples because I was involved in many of those struggles on university campuses. So there's very deep, residual, resilient kind of colonialism that still exists very much, and that helps the establishments, not the people, the establishments across the West empathize with their little settler colony.
You fight for rights recognized by international law, which is the rights to return for the refugees, which are about 7 million, if I'm not wrong. But concretely, where would you put these hypothetically 7 million Palestinians that go back eventually?
I'm not an expert in a lot of sciences that are needed to answer this question. But when people belong to a land and are ethnically cleansed from that land, they have a right to return, period. The practicalities can be discussed by experts, by demographers and geographers and architects and planners and city planners and engineers and so on. Many experts would need to look at that. But people have a right to return. We start with that point. It's not a negotiable right. It's a basic right under international law that all refugees enjoy, and Palestinians should never be an exception to that. So sometimes this question is asked, where will they go? Implying that maybe we shouldn't support that right of return because maybe it will be too problematic. I know you did not mean that, but quite often we hear that question in that sense, and that would totally undermine international law. And would be quite racist, actually, because it would say international law is good as long as it doesn't apply to Palestinians. They can't enjoy their rights under international. Everyone else can. Bosnia, you name it, Sudan, Congo, all refugees, Myanmar, all refugees have a right to return, except Palestinians, because it's politically inconvenient.
Before the ongoing genocide and before almost all the scholars in the world agree that this is a genocide. Some scholars spoke about step motion, so-called genocide. Do you agree with that?
I don't understand what step motion.
That where this phase is like a violent acceleration of a genocide that started some decades before.
That's a very academic point of view. Does it matter for life, for concrete actions to be taken? No, it doesn't. Basically, now we have the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, since January 2024, saying there's a plausible genocide. There's a serious risk of genocide. According to the Genocide Convention, that is sufficient. That's all you need to trigger the legal responsibility to prevent. So people do not have to wait till the ICJ decides ultimately whether it's genocide or not. As long as there's a risk, then the legal responsibility to act, to end complicity, to prevent genocide has been engaged, has been triggered. So every university, every institution, every government, everyone has to make sure they're not enabling acts of genocide, whether it's defined as genocide or not. Now, whether this genocide began in 1948 and now we're seeing just the latest phase of it or not is a very academic question. I personally do not agree. I think Israel has committed genocidal acts definitely during the Nakba, and that history needs to be revisited. But it's an ongoing Nakba, but I wouldn't call it an ongoing genocide. Ongoing Nakba of gradual ethnic cleansing, which is genocidal, yes, but it's not exactly what we're seeing in Gaza. Since October 23, we've entered a completely new era of live-streamed genocide. It's the world's first live-streamed genocide. Even the United States, the only empire today in the world, has never dared to commit to perpetrate a live-streamed genocide. The millions they killed in Afghanistan, in Vietnam, the hundreds of thousands they killed in Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on and so forth, were all hidden from the world. They never flashed it. Yes, we're destroying villages and universities and clinics and hospitals in front of everyone. When the US Army would hit a hospital in Afghanistan, there's, oops, that was a mistake. We thought it was an arms depot, whatever. They would never, but the Israelis don't care. Yes, it's a hospital, and because there was someone who's suspicious. So we decided to kill 100 along with that person who's suspicious. And they get away with it because they have the US and Europe supporting them and preventing, shielding them from accountability, giving them weapons and financial support throughout. So I think it's a very academic question, and we shouldn't concern ourselves too much with that, because in times of genocide, or even plausible genocide, we need to concern ourselves with what to do to end complicity in it. And every single one, especially in the West, has some responsibility to end complicity.
I make the last question, then I leave the to others the questions. We have never seen so different narratives. If I look at Al Jazeera or The Intercept or other media like that, it seems to live in another world, despite what we read or see in our newspapers. What can and also the languages, for example, as also you have said, if I'm not wrong, that Palestinian children have died. Then we have this double standard to speak of Israeli children with a very emotional language and so on. Can we do something to about this or?
Sure. If I were Italian, I would stop reading the absolute majority of the trash newspapers that you call media because they're trash. They're not media. Most of what you call newspapers in Italy are truly trash by any professional standard. The BBC has completely lost any sense of professionalism, as hundreds within the BBC are now exposing. The New York Times has completely lost any sense of professionalism. It became genocidal, spreading rumors, spreading Israeli propaganda that has been proven wrong, yet they never retracted, they never corrected the horrible mistakes that they did that enabled, in a way, the genocide. So I think the young generation in Italy, in the US, in Britain, everywhere, realize that their mainstream media is largely trash. It's a corporate media that lies and lies and lies to sell, to militarize, to securitize society. It's not concerned about the truth, let alone justice, let alone freedom. It's concerned about selling, about corporate advertisements, about the big military companies, and so on. The young generation looks at Gaza and says, this is not just destroying Palestinian lives, tens and tens of thousands of Palestinian lives. This is destroying the very foundations of international law that we grew up with since World War II. They're destroying it. Israel, supported by the US and Europe, is destroying international law. What kind of future will we live in? What kind of future will our children live in? If we enter this might makes right era, where the most powerful decide everything, so tomorrow Russia can invade Italy. Why not? It's much more powerful. If it's done with Ukraine, why not invade Italy? Italy is much, much weaker than Russia. What to prevent it? If we cannot maintain some international law that applies consistently to everyone, then we're all lost. The 99% of humanity will be lost. And young people get it, and they see the media as terribly complicit. One senior UN human rights official who now retired from the UN, Greg Muhaibar, said the media that enabled Israel's genocide should face a Nuremberg-style trial for their complicity in genocide, because knowingly publishing lies that incite, that enable genocide is a crime under international law. The absolute majority of Italian media, I wouldn't call it media because it's trash, but the absolute majority should face a Nuremberg-style trial for inciting to genocide, for dehumanizing Palestinian, for being so disgustingly racist and colonial.
In history, we have cases of media personality, for example, Rwanda genocide. During the Rwanda genocide, some of them were condemned for instigation to genocide.
One of the radio stations, absolutely, yes. But that's Africans. It's easy to condemn it because, as one American senator said, we created the ICC for those people, not for us, not for white people, not for Europe and the US. It's for Africans and Latin Americans and Arabs and Muslims. It's not for us Europeans. He was so honest when he said that, a leader in the Republican Party in the Senate. I guess he was being too frank about it.
Okay, thank you so much, Omar, for your. No.
Okay, thank you again, Omar. I have a couple of questions myself. Then I see that Federico Della Valle has written a comment that I think will trigger a question as well. And then I have a couple of questions for Omar that I think you have addressed it already, but I really wanted a direct answer to some people I was talking to about why boycott is necessary, and so I will ask Omar in a moment. So Paola, I'm speaking to you. My first question is that there seems to be a shift in global opinion recently. I mean, I don't know if everybody can feel this, but there are some topics that were taboo a few months ago. So I would like to ask you what has changed geopolitically and why we can talk about these topics so freely now.
Are you asking me, Giancarlo?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, well, thanks for having me, for organizing this. Let me also heartfully thank Omar, who's always extremely, generous with his time, and also I have found myself admiring more and more all Palestinians that I have been, in touch with and having had the privilege to exchange ideas with in the past couple of years. I want to say that this is an extremely difficult time for all Palestinians, whether they're, outside of Palestine or within Palestine. And still, I find it really commendable, and also a sign of great solidarity that they would find the time to, to talk to us, to speak to us, and after 2 years of genocide, still being there, telling us, please support our struggle, please, and support BDS or PACB, because this is the, one of the I would say the most efficient way to support our struggle, and it is a struggle of justice for you as well. So I think that this is precisely what has changed in the past, in the past year/couple of years, when it comes to the global support for BDS, and more specifically for PACB, which is the academic and cultural boycotts of Israel. I think that the genocide, the absolute horrifying reality of the genocide, has finally opened the eyes of more and more people. And this, of course, has been a great kind of, change that's or factor of change that we have seen in the past couple of years. But I also think that what also played an important role has been also the spreading of something that I like to call global authoritarianism, which is which is very closely connected to what is happening to the genocide and the absolute unaccountability, so lack of accountability that we are seeing in the case of Israel, and how this has
Here
impacted.
in the room, we lost you. Okay, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, I'm back. So I was saying that I think that also the spreading of global authoritarianism also played a role, which is tightly connected, very much related and connected to the ongoing genocide, with the absolute unaccountability of the state of Israel, which is not held accountable by any, state, any. Very few, I should say, states in the global international community, and how this has accelerated and reinforced dynamics of political authoritarianism in our own countries, so that we see how people's freedom of speech, people's right to protest has been policed and limited, especially when it comes to protesting the ongoing genocide, or protesting global complicity. So I think that in a way, the effects of the genocide have come home. There's this expression in English, which is the rooster come back home to roost, which is precisely this idea that a great injustice that is happening somewhere really far away has effects on our daily reality, has effects on our liberties, has effects on our civil and political rights. And this is precisely what we are seeing. So I think that this also has been a factor in, opening people's eyes and, making us understanding that we can't, if we want to defend our own liberties, then we have to defend the lives and the rights of, of Palestinians who are in this moment subjected to a genocide with, with the complicity of our own governments and our own rulers. And I think that in universities, when it comes to research, this is extremely evident as well in the way in which our own work. And I think that you people who are in, hard sciences, perhaps see this in a much more evident way. Although we also see it, in the social sciences. I am a political scientist. I see that, but probably you see it even more explicitly and evidently. How our academic freedom is also being policed and limited in many different ways, from people who, are actually being fired or investigated for their pro-Palestinian rights activism, but also in more subtle ways when we see how our work is being directed towards, production of technology that perhaps is easier to be employed also in, for war and for military purposes than other type of research, which is underfunded. So I think that when we talk about the defense of Palestinian rights through Palestinians-led campaigns such as the BDS and the academic boycott, we are also very much fighting for our rights to, to live in a society that is tolerant and pluralistic when it comes to political opinions, but also to work in a university that actually is better funded, that actually, supports research that also is not necessarily linked or directly funded by something that we can call the war, the military apparatus. So I think that in a way, all these different processes, all these different ways in which we are dispossessed of our rights, in a way have become more evident because of the genocide. And saying this really breaks my heart, because I do understand that, we in so-called West are, so lazy in a way and so self-absorbed that it actually took a genocide to, to open the eyes of many people. But it's, I'm just saying this not as a way to make people feel, powerless or making them feel bad about themselves, but to convey a sense of urgency. The time of words has really ended. We need action now.
Okay, another question. Now, if the time has become mature, what should we ask as an academic collective, and to whom? To the department, to the university, to show solidarity? What are meaningful, responsible, feasible ways for institutions like ours to get involved? You know the difficulties in convincing everybody. We have kind of democratic processes, so we need to find a compromise, or we also have to set minimum limits to what we want to ask. So what would be your suggestion on how to act?
No, I think I will say a few things, but of course, Omar, if you feel like, feel free to chip in and contribute. So this is the first step, and it's really good that you've taken the first step. But there is so many things, that and I hope that you will go from here. So definitely, I think that the first, what Palestinians are asking to us, and what a huge number of institutions, even the conferences of rectors of Belgium and Spain have endorsed, is the interruption of institutional collaborations. this is the way in which we put pressure on this must, what I'm saying is that this should be your demands in a way that you're able to put pressure on your institution, and this will increase and will actually create pressure on Israeli institution. The pressure is felt in Israel. This is not a useless it's useless thing to do, a useless kind of exercise, moral exercise that we do. The pressure is actually felt in Israel. As Omar before said, the fact that the Israeli government is spending billions of dollars in trying to contrast, to defame, to slander against all those who support the different boycotts campaigns is an indication of the fact that BDS and PACB do work. They do work. They put pressure. Israeli universities are losing money on this. The whole philosophy sustaining the campaigns is that complicity must become expensive, must become unaffordable, too costly politically, but also financially for institutions, our institutions, to remain complicit. So I think that in order to make this complicity unaffordable economically and politically, we should demand the interruption of the institutional collaborations. I think that so I remember when I was in Pisa with Maya Wind to present her book. So Maya was suggesting and this is also what PACB has been suggesting for 20 years, a sort of, a strategy. It's called radical gradualism, whereby, in a way, we start from our own, environment, our own context, and then, kind of escalate our demands. So I think that a good way is to start from, your department. There are many different departments in Italy at the moment that have voted to interrupt institutional collaborations. Torino did it a few weeks ago. Then you have Florence, the Department of Mathematics, and a few other departments have done, have decided to go this road, but with a view to bring the position of your department to the Senate, to the academic Senate, so that the pressure must be felt at the higher level of the whole university, so that your department does not, doesn't remain in a way, what you do doesn't remain in a way limited to your department, but gets to be escalated to the level of the whole Ateneo, to the level of the whole university. This is very important because this is how, change is ignited.
Okay, thank you. I think I will pass to the questions from the audience. There is Chiara who raised her hand. I will enable your microphone. Camera.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can I? Okay, here I am. So first of all, thank you very much. Really, it's very, very interesting. The only thing is that we feel even more without, ashamed of how much we have not done, let's say. So I have a few questions for what concern the university. The usual comment that we receive is that okay, I go a bit back. I work at CERN, and when Ukraine was attacked by Russia, there was interruption. CERN interrupted the connection with CERN, and I was very much against this because I really thought and felt that the scientific connection could be a way to keep the dialogue and to go for peace, and so not interrupting the connection, the scientific connection. So this is to give you the idea of who I am and the way we normally feel about this kind of thing. I had a kind of same thoughts for Palestinian, but then I completely changed my mind because I think that the situation there was very, very much different. And I feel that there is much more, I say it in a, I mean, I'm a bit ignorant, I'm studying of all of the things, but I would say that in Israel, we have a kind of militarized society. So the connection between the university and the military apparatus and the economic apparatus is very, very tight. And so I understand that indeed to cut academic connection there would be the correct thing to do. But everybody says what I was saying. So says you should, I mean, we can cut the dual use, and this has been already done, but to cut everything, all the connections, to do a complete boycott would be something that is not correct. So what would you answer? And the second thing is I ask, so Omar mentioned these 94% academic that are in favor of the genocide. Do you have a number to quote? What is the reference? And the last, do you have a list of department or university in Italy? Can I find or in Europe that have, so there is a database where I can find information on who has already cut completely the ties with academic. Thank you very much. Sorry for the free questions.
So are we taking other questions, or shall I answer? What's
Chiara, the question was directed to Paola or Omar, or which one to
No, I mean, whoever can want to answer, yeah.
Can I suggest that we perhaps address this question by Chiara, Omar? If you wanna start, I can chip in later as you like.
Sure. Yes, I didn't say 94% of academics. I said 94% of Jewish Israelis, which must include all the sectors. I just put in the chat the link to that poll done, I believe, November, if I'm not mistaken, 2023. So that's where this number comes from. As to your question on whether academic ties should continue despite war crimes against humanity, or even genocide happening, is first and foremost an ethical question, but it's also a legal question. As legal expert, I'll start with the legal because it's more straightforward. The University of Antwerp had legal experts who issued a very important study, 2024 legal opinion rather, that says, they argue that it's the legal obligation of universities to cut ties with Israeli universities because they're proven to be part of the system of oppression. So they're not universities that are generating knowledge and maybe doing one or two nasty projects with the military. They're very much part and parcel of the established military-industrial complex in Israel, as my own has shown. And it's not just the military. It's in geography, it is in archaeology, in philosophy, my field, ethics. I'm an engineer, but I'm also studying philosophy. In ethics, every discipline in Israel has been weaponized to serve settler colonialism, apartheid, occupation, and now genocide. So the entire system is complicit. So legally, there's an obligation. Ethically, definitely, there's an obligation that is even stronger than the legal obligation, because you weigh the harm and the benefit to the most affected, Palestinians in this case, and then to humanity. As someone interested in ethics, I first have to look at the most affected, not the Italians, the Palestinians are the most affected. So will continuing Italian university collaborations with Israeli universities do more harm or more good to Palestinians? I think the answer is very obvious. It does massive harm to Palestinians. As 15 heads of Palestinian universities have said, as all Palestinian academic unions have said, you're destroying us. So cut those ties. Don't legitimize, don't normalize the complicity of Israeli universities. So that's a key question. And to humanity at large, even if you put aside the Palestinians, Israeli universities have produced mostly weaponized or dual use things used for repression and oppression and denial of rights. Name some of the major Israeli exports: spyware, weapons. That's what they pride themselves in. What they call high tech is mostly militarized, securitized high tech that is used in repression, that comes out of the army anyway, comes from the military and security industry anyway. So yes, there is an ethical obligation to cut ties, because otherwise you are being complicit as a university. Now, as Paula said, there's an urgency of cutting those ties, at least suspending them while the university takes time to investigate the harm it's doing. This is what several, even Dutch universities have done. Forget the Belgians, they were always more progressive. Even the Dutch, not your most progressive universities, have cut ties with Israeli universities, have suspended many projects. In the meanwhile, and in parallel, PACB has been advocating what we call a policy on ethical academic ties, or PEAT, P-E-A-T. This is a universal policy that says, that is not Palestine specific. It says this university shall not engage in academic ties with universities that are knowingly, persistently implicated in grave human rights violations, especially war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Be it in Congo, in Sudan, in Myanmar, or in Palestine, we cannot engage with those universities because they're implicated. So that's the general policy. But adopting that as a general policy by the university should not come at a price of suspending relations with Israeli universities that are doing harm now. So you have to suspend those relations and work on passing this general intersectional policy, if you will.
Can you, thank you, Omar. Can you put a link pointing to this idea, I mean, like, to the document or something about this general idea of political, ethical.
Oh, the PEAT, the Policy on Ethical Academic Ties?
Yeah, thank you very much.
If I can, I don't know if this Teams Microsoft allows me, but I'll try.
Yeah, can I chip in for a second? So, grazie professoressa per la domanda. So in the chat, there are a couple of of interesting links, perhaps. Can I just add that the legal arguments that that is about protecting, if you want, our institution, because protecting them from being for being held accountable in the future for a crime, which is the crime of complicity, is exactly what also what Francesca Albanese has been repeating for over 2 years now, when it comes to when it comes to supporting the argument of why universities, but also economic entities and corporations should cut ties. That's precisely for for avoiding legal legal sorry, I know the word, but it doesn't escape from my mind now. Liability, for avoiding legal liability. I also wanted to add something about the boycott of Russia when Russia invaded Ukraine, which is also which is a comparison that is often brought up, apart from what has already been said in terms of the relation that exists between Israeli universities and research centers and the security apparatus. But I think that it's also important to point out how the boycott of Russia was done in a way that also found me I also found it problematic, whereby, for instance, there was made no distinction between the between institutions and individuals, which is something that the PACB does, and I think it's important, especially when it comes to to working with colleagues who within Israeli Institute, there are not many, to be honest, but a few of them exist, colleagues who, who do not only support Palestinian rights to return, the end of the occupation, but also have anti-Zionist, political opinions. There are very few, but who definitely, also suffer from the extreme authoritarian environment that exists within Israeli institutions. So there's no, those are considered individuals that are not, in a way, targets of the boycott. And I'm going to stop here because I know there's a whole debate, but perhaps then we're going too much in the details. So the focus on institutions is extremely important. Also to avoid situations that were, frankly, ridiculous, where we had, for instance, a course on Dostoevsky literature in Italy at the University of Milan being, cancelled as an effect of this boycott. The, Palestinians have been working and, have been challenged by the whole international community when it comes to their boycott campaigns for 20 years. When we talk about PACB and when we talk about BDS, we are talking about campaigns. We are talking about also theoretical efforts. We're talking about a whole work which is theoretical, which is political, which is civil, which is philosophical as well, that has been, that is so refined precisely because it's been, brought, it has been existing for 2 decades. So I understand the comparison, but we always have to remember that these constitutively, these are 2 very different boycotts, and the Palestinian one is if you want to theorize at a level that is much more refined, that is much more attentive, that is much more careful, that is genuinely led by anti-racist, beliefs and commitment. Just wanted to add this.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think we don't have any other residents, but I see a message from Federico Della Valle. I think you all can read this message. It says, Omar answer to the Jewish state issue seems to me too simple. It is not satisfying. Then he explains that the first reference to what would be later known as Israel was 1917 Balfour Declaration. The very, I'm summarizing because it's long, the very history of Israel is paved with discrimination between Jews and non-Jews. In 2018, Israel was declared by its rules the state of the Jews. At the same time, I do not remember that any Jewish community as such refused the definition of Israel that talks also for them or made any declaration, not even against the genocidal acts by Israel. Mixing Israel and Jewishness is at the same time pretended and a reality. This makes everything more difficult for Palestinian supporters as it cannot be solved with a slogan. Omar, have you anything to add about this?
I don't want to divert the attention to this rather hypothetical academic discussion, honestly. I'll be happy to communicate with the professor who communicated this. I will be happy to email them to write exactly what I meant. It is not, who cares what the Balfour Declaration calls it? That's British imperialism. Of course they want to call it the Jewish state. Balfour was an anti-Semite who was trying to get rid of the Jews from Britain. So who cares what Balfour calls it, what Israel calls itself? Jewish communities have, they're not majority, yes, they're still minorities, but anti-Zionist Jewish communities like Jewish Voice for Peace in the US, the fastest growing Jewish group in the world, in fact, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of supporters in the United States, in the belly of the beast, has stood out against the genocide from day one, has even said that Israel is committing the final solution of Palestinians, and has supported BDS for so many years. And it always says Israel does not speak on our behalf, it cannot represent us. Even some of the Zionist Jewish Congress members have said, like Dianne Feinstein, when she was in Congress, when Netanyahu stood in Congress and said, I speak for the Jewish people and so on. She said, no, you don't. You don't represent me. You don't speak for me. You speak for yourself, for your state, for your politics. You don't speak for me. But that can take us a lot of discussion that we can do on email possibly.
Okay, thank you. Is there any question from the room?
I just wanted to share in the chat something about Horizon, because I know most academics in Europe think this is untouchable, nothing can be done. If you read this article, it's not that long. Israel has been pushed to the sidelines of Horizon. And this is not because the European Union woke up and became moral, it won't. It's because of pressure from below, exclusion from below. Israel is being completely marginalized because many universities, many academics, many departments refuse to do Horizon projects with Israeli universities. And this is pushing them to the sideline. If you read the article, in 2025, it's not over yet, it's still mid-year, but there's a decline of 68% compared to a couple of years ago in projects involving Israeli universities being accepted in Horizon. 68%. So this is not like a 5% decrease. It's a massive, drastic increase. How did this happen? By the thousands and thousands and thousands of academics across Europe saying we won't work with complicit Israeli universities. We will not accept a project that has an Israeli university. University of Barcelona was one of the very first to do that, but also the University of Ghent and several other universities have followed suit. And then, as Paula said, the presidents of all Belgian universities have taken a unified position, telling the EU, stop pushing Israel down our throats, basically. Stop imposing Israel on every Horizon project. Israel gets more on average than any European state, than Germany, than France, than Italy, than the Netherlands. Israel on average gets more from Horizon, used to get more from her. Imagine how privileged, how pampered it is in Europe. So this is a very important article to share. And also one last thing, Yara was asking if we have a link to how many universities have divested or cut links. This link in PACB is always updated. So it has the Trinity College in Dublin, and all the latest decisions are all there.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from the room. Please.
Yeah, actually, I was I was late because you anticipated me, because I just wanted to ask about Horizon projects. I have heard about some departments in our university were thinking about pulling out of Horizon projects, but actually the main reason line is that it's not worth it because it will harm more us than Israeli institutions and universities. So if you could just expand a little bit about that. This question is for both of us actually, and I just wanted also to ask another thing. I mean, your opinion about another thing. I'm part of the student movement for Palestine, which as is active from November of 23, and we have been advocating for the academic boycott the last 2 years, but we have not been heard until right now. I mean, actually, in the main reasoning that was opposed to this idea of boycotting university is that our duty as academics is to build bridges, but I think that's such bullshit, because bridges are built only with some university. We don't have that I know accords or partnerships with Palestinian universities, as we don't have a partnership with most universities in the global south, while our accords with Israeli university, for example, are very are a lot. And what we realized is that one thing standing between us, the student community who agrees about the academic boycott, and it being really realized at the highest levels of our university, is the hierarchical structure of university, who are still to this day really not transparent at all about which partnership we have also with weapons manufacturers, defense military industries, and so on. And students' voices are really rarely heard. So I just wanted to ask if you have some thoughts about what needs to change internally in our university. How can we make them really democratic, and how can our institutions' decisions really be an expression of what the majority of people who are part of them, yeah, I mean, that. Thank you very much.
Paola, would you like to?
Yeah, Omar, sure, I can start. So I wanted to say, so the first thing that comes to my mind is that I know that you guys at Pisa University changed your statute last year. It was a participated process whereby different departments, schools, and research institutes got a voice and suggestions to kind of include changes. And I know, if I'm not mistaken, that your statute, vostro statuto, at the moment includes a provision that says that the feasibility of research projects is also measured against the effects of the results of the research projects and of the impact, of the research project on human rights respect. So I think that's precisely what we are. It goes in line with the legal arguments that Omar has explained before. Francesca Albanese is also making that the research has to endorse the principle of no harm. So whereby the results of a research project contribute in any way or another to violate or to damage human rights respects, or to help systematic violations of human rights, then it can be that the argument should be made that research projects or that international collaboration, institutional collaboration, should not be established or should be suspended, interrupted, cut, whatever word verb you prefer. So this is the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing, when it comes to how can we kind of popularize and strengthen the our positions, and what is a struggle for justice, really. I think that what we can do is precisely what you are doing now. I know that I said that words, the time for words, has ended, kind of run out of time, and I do think that I do believe that. I think it is, this is not only me. I mean, just open your social media and watch what's being streamed from Gaza. I mean, the time for words has ended. So I think that's what you are doing, building up people's power in this sense, building up, a power and demands for accountability from below is I think what we have to continue to do. What you are doing, And I think that, you know, there's no other option really. We won't see you know, institutions demanding accountability unless we make them demand accountability, unless we put pressure on them, you know, to do that. And, you know, as you know, I work and live in Ireland, in the city of Dublin. I'm not at Trinity College, but you know, what has happened in Trinity College in the past year is a very good example of this and how it can work. Trinity College used to be one of the, you know, of course, is one of the super prestigious universities in the Anglo-speaking, English-speaking world, and used to have a lot of collaborations with Israel, used to profit a lot from, you know, collaborating, joint research project, whatever, with Israel. What has happened was that students and colleagues and lecturers, you know, have cooperated and worked together and allied.
And trade unions.
And trade
unions, yeah.
Thank you, Omar. Have cooperated and worked together to make this possible. So there is no other way. And the same in Ghent. Our colleagues in Ghent, you know, have done the same. Trade unions, lecturers, academics, and students together. So this is what you are doing, and you should kind of, you know, push more for this.
Yes, I mean, there's very little to add to what Paula said. I know you're in the room, so you couldn't see the documents I've shared in the chat, but maybe Giancarlo can share them with you later. If you read the document on Horizon, you'll be shocked. I mean, I'm following everything related to PACB very closely. When we worked on this document, I was shocked with the numbers, how much Israel's percentage has declined because of power from below, not because of from the above. From the above, the Germans control a lot, and it's very hard to move things from above, as we know. But from below, a lot is happening. And again, I wanted to cite the universities in the Netherlands. University of Amsterdam did something unique, and it's a very conservative university, not pro-Palestinian at all, not lefty. I mean, they don't have leftism as part of their university culture in the Netherlands anyway, not like Bologna or something. University of Amsterdam staff, in solidarity with Palestine, did this unprecedented historic strike for 4 days, a 4-day strike calling for an academic boycott. We've never had that in history, because in the Netherlands, I don't know how it is in Italy, you cannot strike unless it's contract related. You cannot strike based on human rights or international law. That's not allowed. It's extraneous. It has to be based on the contract. But somehow the trade union there showed that this is connected to the environment of work, that you're making us complicit. Another example I wanted to cite, which was really inspiring, is Sweden. They did this conscientious objection effort, which is very, very inspiring, really. It basically says, as academics, we conscientiously object to participating in projects with universities involved in crimes against humanity and war crimes and so on. We have a right to object. And this has really inspired many other academics in many universities, and we're seeing a lot of this. Final point I wanted to say, and Paula has said this, students by nature are much less conservative than academics. Academics tend to be much more conservative in general than students. The status quo, the establishment, the prestige, the rules. And what you said in your question is absolutely right. There's this mythology of democracy that does not really exist. If you look at the governance of universities, there's an illusion of democracy. Staff, especially tenured staff, are given this illusion, this feeling as if they have a lot of power. They don't. When push comes to shove, it's a few bureaucrats and the corporations that support research, especially military and technology research, that call the shots. And the universities have shown themselves, from the Netherlands to Sweden, to Italy, to Britain, to everywhere, to Ireland even, very, very undemocratic. We have to push them to democratize them. So your question is very complex, how to make a university more democratic, more accountable to its community, to the students, to the unions, to staff, to the workers. That's the $1 million question. It's a very tough question, but really it's power from below. In the BDS movement, our theory of change is from the grassroots to the grass tops. To affect decisions on top, you have to build power from below. There's no other way. There are no shortcuts. You don't just go with moral arguments and try to convince the university administration, you just don't understand the reality. Here's what's happening in Gaza. Shame on you. Naughty, naughty. You should act better. They don't care. Bureaucrats hardly ever care. You have to push them to care. And that's what student encampments and mobilizations and staff mobilizations are doing. They're pushing from below.
Thank you again. Is there there's another question from the room?
Hi, I'm Irene. I'm part of the students' movement. I do not have a question, just two considerations. One is about the statuto. That for what we know, the statute have to be approved by the minister. So now is not active. So this is one of the reasons that why our campaign as a student is going on, and also in our opinion the statute is very vague, I think, and doesn't include anything about the dual use technology. Another consideration is that we as students of scientific disciplines know that our studies are very implicated with the genocide and with the global escalation of war. Sorry, my English is very bad, but I'm trying. I'm very anxious. So last year we had an encampment during the month of May, and we wrote a document that we presented to the academic senate where we asked to boycott not only the Israeli university but also the military corporation as Leonardo or Eni, but the university didn't hear us and didn't took a stance. But we also know that the limit of the students' movement was that we were only students and we were not able to collaborate with all the academic community. But now we are very happy about this initiative. We are happy about the collaboration that is going on between us and the professors of our department. So we wanted to thank all the professors that are here to listen. We want to thank Omar and Paula. Thank you very much. Because we think that in front of the brutality of the genocide that we can see live stream now, it's very easy to start thinking that we cannot do anything. But we know that it's not something far away, but it has its roots here in Europe, in Italy, starting with the weapon exportation and the scientific and academic corporation. And we have the moral responsibility to do what's in our power to stop it. So thank you for your contribution. And we also want to invite every member of the academic community, the professor here, the students, to support actively the document that is going to be discussed in the next Senate, the next academic Senate, the 11th of July, where we as a students movement are organizing a sit-in under the Rettorato. I don't know how to say that in English, I'm sorry. Where there is going to the discussion to show our support. And we were thinking that maybe we can do the demonstration, a demonstration here, maybe with the whistles there, and we wanted to invite the professor to do that with us. And so thank you for that.
Chiara, I think you can speak already.
If there are no other questions, I take the opportunity for one more question. So we have talked a lot about cutting ties with Israel. What can we do for? Is there something that we can do for the academia, Palestinian academia? So, is there still something alive, and what could I mean, could we try to do as real action? Thank you.
Thanks for this. There are at least a couple of important initiatives done by Palestinian universities in the West Bank in collaboration with the academics and administrations of the universities that were destroyed in Gaza, mainly to support education, distance learning, basically, until there's a possibility of re-establishing the universities. Some in Europe have looked at this from a very charitable perspective, in the sense that let's bring as many academics to Europe to teach, basically, because they have no jobs, they have no life, and so on. But what Palestinians are calling for is not to empty Gaza of academics, is to support them to stay, to steadfast, to re-establish academic research in Gaza after the genocide is ended, and after we have some rehabilitation of the academic community. So I look for the links. There's a project that's done with Birzeit University, how to help support that. Some professors are giving lectures on the internet, helping with certain areas, especially scientific areas that are easier. Social sciences are more difficult because of language barriers, but at least in your areas, scientific, English is pretty much accepted, and it's easier. So that's one way to support that. But the most important form of support is to help end the genocide. Everything else is a luxury at this point if we cannot end the genocide, because Israel is intent on killing and destroying and ethnically cleansing every last one of us in Gaza. So how do we do that? End complicity at your university. That's how you help end the genocide. You cannot influence international relations, but you can influence your sphere of influence, your university. And much more needs to be done to cut every university in Italy, to cut its ties with Israel. That is the most important help we need right now.
Okay,
Can I just add?
Thank you.
I'm gonna. Sorry, just wanted to add that there was an initiative. There was a call for volunteers last year circulating, but then you know, they covered like all the spots available. But so there's a page on the website of Birzeit University about this initiative. So I'm gonna put it in the chat. You know, perhaps you can email them and see what's you know, if they still need volunteers. And I haven't seen anything, I must say, since they filled all the available places, but maybe they are running another round.
Okay, thank you again. I think we are running out of time. So if there are no more comments.
I just want to really thank you, Omar and Paola, for all the information, for your time, because that is the most precious things. And I think for us it was very, very, very useful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can say on Chiara, I think that to those who accuse us of burning bridges, I think we're setting grounds for new bridges. I hope long-standing ones. So thank you again, and
thank you.
Let's keep in touch, and let's hope for the better.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye, Omar. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.